Cardboard box was heavier than I expected. Not because of what was inside it, a chipped coffee mug, a desk plant I'd somehow managed not to kill in 11 months, a framed photo of my golden retriever, but because of what it represented. I was being walked out of my own father's company by a security guard named Hector, who kept apologizing under his breath because he liked me. He'd brought me a slice of his wife's tres leches, cake on my birthday in March. "I'm real sorry, Miss Bryce," he murmured as we crossed the marble lobby of Halverton Tower in downtown Seattle. "Whatever this is, it's gotta be a mistake." It was a mistake, all right. Just not the kind he thought. Behind me, 23 floors up, the man who had just fired me was probably already pouring himself a celebratory bourbon from the crystal decanter in what he believed was his office. He was 31, with a jaw that looked like he'd ordered it from a catalog, and he answered to the name the CEO's son. The thing is, my father only ever had one child, and I was standing on the sidewalk with a dying ficus, wearing the cheap blazer I'd bought at a Nordstrom rack outlet specifically so I'd blend in with the other junior associates, trying to figure out how a complete stranger had walked into my family's company and convinced everyone he was the heir to it. Let me back up. My name is Tegan Halverton. I'm 28. My father, Edmund Halverton, built Halverton Maritime Logistics from a single leased warehouse in Tacoma in 1987 into a Pacific Northwest shipping empire that now moves more than $2 billion in cargo annually. My mother passed away when I was 9. Pancreatic cancer. The cruel kind, the kind that takes someone in 14 weeks. After she died, my dad raised me himself, between board meetings and red-eyes to Singapore. He used to read me bedtime stories over speakerphone from hotel rooms in Shenzhen. I loved him. I still love him. And when I graduated from Wharton with my MBA 2 years ago, I told him I didn't want to walk into a corner office with my last name on the door. I wanted to start at the bottom. I wanted to actually understand the company before I tried to run it someday. He cried when I told him that. My father is not a crier. He hugged me and said, "Then do it right, kid. Do it the way I would've." So I did. I dropped my last name. Took my mother's maiden name, Pierce. Tegan Pierce. I dyed my hair from blonde to a forgettable mousy brown. I got a junior analyst job in the operations division on the 14th floor through a real, blind application. No strings. No favors. HR didn't know. My direct manager didn't know. Only 3 people in the entire building knew who I was. My father, his executive assistant of 22 years, and the head of corporate security, a former MP named Walt who'd been with the company since I was in middle school. For 10 months, it worked beautifully. I learned the choke points in our supply chain. I learned which department heads were brilliant and which ones were coasting. I learned that the break room coffee was genuinely terrible and that the woman who refilled the snack machines, Marisol, had a son in his 2nd year at Seattle U on a partial scholarship and worked 2 other jobs to cover the rest. I made a friend. His name was Cyrus. Cyrus Okonkwo sat 3 desks down from me in the bullpen. He was 29. Brilliant. Came up through community college and a state school on a tangle of grants and student loans. And he was the kind of person who stayed late not because he was trying to impress anyone, but because he genuinely loved untangling logistics problems. He brought leftover jollof rice in Tupperware and shared it with me when I forgot lunch. He laughed too loud at his own jokes. The first week I started, I dropped a stack of customs paperwork all over the floor, and he was the only person in that fluorescent-lit bullpen who actually got down on his knees to help me pick it up. We became friends fast. The kind of friends where you don't have to explain yourself. He told me about his mother, Ifioma, 61, a nurse's aide who'd raised him alone after his father died in a construction accident when Cyrus was 12. She lived in a small rental in Beacon Hill. He sent her money every month. He was the reason she was going to retire someday. I never told him who I was. Not once. Even when it started to feel like a lie I was sitting on top of, a heavy one. I told myself I would, eventually. After. When the time was right. Then everything went sideways. It started on a Tuesday in early September. I came in at 7:30 with my usual oat milk latte and found a company-wide email at the top of my inbox from someone named Roland Halverton with the title, "Heir Apparent, Office of the Chief Executive." I read that line 3 times. I'm not exaggerating. 3 times. My stomach did this slow, sick lurch, like missing a step in the dark. The email introduced him as Edmund Halverton's son, returning to the company after years of international development experience, and announced he would be taking on an expanded role overseeing operations beginning immediately. There was a photo. He was tall, dark-haired, expensively dressed, and I had never seen him before in my life. I'm an only child. I know I'm an only child. I have spent every Christmas of my life as the only person under my father's tree. I sat at my desk and I just stared at the screen. Cyrus rolled his chair over. Yo, you see this email about the boss's kid? I didn't even know Mr. Halverton had a son. Neither did I said. My voice came out thin. Apparently he's coming down to our floor today. Some kind of tour. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. My hands were doing that thing where they go numb at the fingertips. I tried to call my father from a stairwell at 9:15. It went to voicemail. He was on a flight to Rotterdam, a deal he'd been working on for a year. The kind that required him to be physically present and physically unreachable. He wouldn't land for 9 more hours. His EA, Donna, was with him. I was alone in this building with a stranger who was telling everyone he was me. At 10 o'clock, the elevator dinged on our floor and Roland Halverton stepped out. I will say this, he had presence. He walked through the bullpen like he'd been raised in it. He shook hands. He smiled at the right people. He had a Navy suit that probably cost what Marisol made in 3 months. The department head, a man named Philip Dornan, who I'd already privately flagged from my father as a problem, walked beside him like a man escorting royalty. When he passed my desk, Roland's eyes flicked over me and didn't catch. I was no one. A junior analyst with mousy hair and a clearance store blazer. He kept walking. I made it to the women's restroom and I threw up. That afternoon, the rules started. A new email from Roland's office, all junior analysts would now arrive by 7:10 a.m., not 8:00. Lateness would be deducted from pay. Lunch breaks were reduced from 60 minutes to 30. A new performance review process would be implemented within the week, with disciplinary measures for anyone deemed insufficiently engaged. 3 people from our floor were terminated by the end of the day on charges that didn't even make sense. Attitudinal misalignment, whatever that means. One of them was a single mom named Renata who'd been with the company 8 years. Cyrus and I sat in the break room that night at 6:30, the building mostly empty. This isn't normal, he said quietly. Tegan. This isn't normal, he said quietly. Tegan, this isn't how this place runs. I know, Mr. Port. Halverton wouldn't allow this. I know. He looked at me strangely then, not suspicious, just like he was hearing something in my voice. I changed the subject. 2 days later, Cyrus's phone rang in the middle of a department meeting. He stepped out, came back 5 minutes later with his face the color of paper. His mother had collapsed at work. They were taking her to Harborview. They thought it was her heart. I drove him there myself. Sat in the ER waiting room with him for 6 hours while the doctors ran tests. It wasn't her heart. It was worse in a way. It was a mass on her pancreas. They were 90% sure it was cancer. They needed to do a biopsy, then probably surgery, then chemo, and her insurance, the cheap state plan she'd had since aging into Medicare gaps, was going to cover maybe 1/3 of it. Cyrus sat in a plastic chair with his head in his hands and said, I don't know how I'm going to do this. I don't know how I'm going to do this, T. I had, and I'm telling you this part exactly because it matters, about $4.2 million in liquid assets in a personal trust my mother had left me, plus the dividends from my shares in the company. I could have written a check that night. I didn't. Not because I didn't want to, because I knew, sitting there in that waiting room with the smell of antiseptic and bad vending machine coffee, that if I pulled out my phone and Venmo'd my friend $100,000, I'd have to explain who I really was, and I wasn't ready. Not because of pride, because of him. Cyrus was a proud person. The kind of proud that mattered. If I revealed myself in a hospital waiting room while his mother was upstairs being prepped for a biopsy, every conversation we'd ever had was going to look retroactively like a lie. The friendship was going to feel like charity. So I did the next best thing. I made a phone call at 2 a.m. from my apartment to my father's EA Donna, who had landed with him in Rotterdam and was the only person I trusted in that moment. Donna, I said, I need you to do something for me, and I need you to never tell my father I asked, and I need it done in the next 12 hours. Tell me. There's a woman at Harborview Medical Center. Ifeoma Okonkwo. She has cancer. I want every bill, from intake to whatever she needs over the next 2 years. Surgery, chemo, follow-up, whatever, paid in full, anonymously, through the Patient Assistance Fund. Make it look like a grant. Make it look like she qualified for some Pacific Northwest oncology program. Make sure she never gets a bill. Not one. Donna didn't even hesitate. Done by morning. And Donna, there's a son. Cyrus Okonkwo, he works at the company. I want groceries delivered to his mother's house every week starting Friday. Real food. Not gift baskets. Actual groceries from a local store, like someone's looking out for her. From a neighborhood meal program, make up the name. Tegan, what? You're a good kid. I cried for a long time after I hung up. I went into work the next day with my eyes swollen and my mood sharper than it had any business being. And Roland was already on the floor of the bullpen, dressing down a woman named Lacey for a typo in a memo. He was leaning over her desk, voice low and contemptuous. Lacey was 45. She had 2 kids. She was crying. I walked over before I even decided to. Excuse me, I said. He turned. He had blue eyes. I noted that. My father has hazel eyes. I have hazel eyes. I have hazel eyes. Yes? And you are? Tegan Pierce. Junior analyst. I think you've made your point. Lacey's a strong contributor. The typo's on a draft, it's not going out. The bullpen went quiet. I could feel Cyrus staring at me from his desk. Roland smiled. It was not a friendly smile. And you think it's your place to tell me when I've made my point, Miss Pierce. I think it's anyone's place to tell another adult to stop bullying their coworker in a public space. You're fired. I figured. Get your things and get out. I got my things. I got my dined ficus and my chipped coffee mug and the photo of my dog. Cyrus stood up at his desk, opened his mouth, started to say something. I shook my head at him. Once, hard. Don't. Not yet. That's how I ended up on the sidewalk with Hector in the box. Here's what Roland didn't know. My father was landing at SeaTac in 4 hours, and his actual EA, Donna, who had been with him for 22 years and who I had just called at 2 in the morning, was a woman who did not forget when somebody screwed with her boss's child. I went home. I didn't cry. I made tea. I sat on my couch, with my dog's head in my lap, and I thought about my mother. I thought about how she would have handled this. My mother had been quiet, but she had been steel. She'd been the one who taught my father, when they were young and broke and renting that first warehouse in Tacoma, to never let anyone treat his people poorly. The people who load the trucks are the company, Edmund, she used to say. Not the suits. At 7 that night, my phone rang. My father, Tegan. His voice was tight in a way I had not heard since the night my mother died. Tell me everything. I did. The whole thing. The fake email, the new rules, the firings, Lacey, Cyrus's mother, the box, all of it. He listened without interrupting. When I was done, he said, I'll see you in the morning. Don't go near the building. Don't call anyone. Wald is already on it. Dad, who is he? Roland, who is that? There was a long silence on the line. His mother, my father said slowly, was someone I dated for about 6 months in 1991, before I met your mom. She told me 8 years ago that she had a son and that he was mine. I paid for a paternity test. He wasn't. I have the documentation. I haven't heard from her since. So he's a man who's been told a story his whole life and decided to come collect on it. And someone inside this company helped him do it. That's the part that matters. That's the part we're going to find. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my kitchen table and I drafted a list, by hand, on a yellow legal pad, of every person on the 14th floor who'd been complicit. Philip Dornan, the department head, escorting Roland around like a king. The HR director, Marlena, who had to have processed his onboarding paperwork without flagging that nobody on the executive floor had ever requested it. The head of internal communications who'd sent that email out under Roland's signature without a single verification call to my father's office. By morning, the list had 13 names on it. My father landed at 6. He went home, showered, put on a suit, and was at Halverton Tower by 8:30. He didn't tell anyone he was coming. He walked into his own building with Walt and 3 corporate attorneys and went directly to the executive floor. I wasn't there for what happened in the next 2 hours. I heard about it later, in pieces, mostly from Donna, who told me the story over tea at her house the following weekend with a kind of relish I had never heard from her before. My father called an emergency all-hands meeting in the main auditorium for 10 a.m. The entire building, every department, every floor was required to attend. No exceptions. He had IT pull the live feed onto every monitor in every break room for anyone who couldn't fit in the auditorium itself. At 9:58, he had walk Roland into the auditorium personally and seat him in the front row. At 10 exactly, my father walked to the podium. He did not yell. He has never been a yeller. He spoke quietly into the microphone, the way he used to read me stories when I was small. He told them first about my mother, about what she taught him about the warehouse, the trucks, the people. He told them about the day I was born. He told them that he had one child, exactly one, a daughter, and that she had asked him 2 years ago for the privilege of working in this company under her mother's maiden name, on the bottom floor, without any privileges or protections, because she wanted to learn the business the right way. He told them her name was Tegan Halverton. He told them she had been illegally terminated the day before by a man impersonating his son. Then he had Walt walk Roland out of the auditorium in handcuffs in front of every single employee in the company. And then, and Donna said this part with actual tears in her eyes, he called the names from my legal pad. Philip Dornan, Marlena from HR, the head of comms, all 13. He called them by name and he asked them to stand up, and then he fired them, every one of them, on the spot in front of 2,000 people with cause, for either complicity or gross negligence in allowing a stranger to impersonate his family. The auditorium was silent for about 4 seconds after the last name, and then, Donna said, somebody in the back started clapping. And then the whole room was clapping. People were crying. Marisol, the woman who refilled the snack machines, was sobbing into her uniform. I walked into the auditorium then. Through the side door, I'd been waiting in the hallway with Walt's deputy. I walked down the aisle in jeans and a sweatshirt, no makeup, my hair pulled back, and I walked up onto the stage and I hugged my father for a long time in front of everyone. I found Cyrus in the 3rd row. He was just staring at me. I came down off the stage and I sat down in the empty seat next to him, and I said, "I'm sorry. I should have told you a long time ago. I was a coward. I understand if you're angry." He didn't say anything for what felt like a year. Then he said, was it you? The hospital. The grocery thing my mom kept getting, was that you? I nodded. He put his hands over his face. You absolute, his voice cracked. Tegan. I know. My mom is going to live. I know. My mom is going to live. I know, they told me on Tuesday. The treatment is working. They got it early. She's going to be okay. I started crying. He started crying. We sat in the 3rd row of the auditorium of my father's company while my father stood at the podium and answered shouted questions from reporters who had somehow gotten in. And we cried together like 2 idiots. And at some point Cyrus put his arm around my shoulders and said, "You know we're still friends, right? I'm not gonna let you get out of being my friend just because you're rich. You still owe me from the time I bought you Thai food." I laughed so hard I hiccuped. The investigation took 6 weeks. It turned out Philip Dornan had been Roland's connection. They had met 3 years earlier at a yacht club in San Diego, where Roland had been working as a sommelier and selling people on the story that he was the secret heir to a Pacific Northwest shipping fortune. Philip, who'd been embezzling small amounts from a vendor account for years and was looking for a way to position himself for a power grab when my father retired, had seen an opportunity. They'd planned the takeover for almost 2 years. The forged paternity documents were impressive. The fake international employment history was impressive. The list of internal employees they'd cultivated was longer than my legal pad. Roland was charged with felony fraud, identity-related impersonation, and a half-dozen other things I don't fully understand. He took a plea. He's serving 4 years. Philip took 11, because he also pled to the embezzlement once they audited his accounts. Cyrus was promoted to senior operations analyst the month after the auditorium meeting. Not by me. By the new department head, who'd been 3 levels below Philip and was the best logistics mind on the floor. I had nothing to do with it. He earned it. He earns it every day. His mother is in remission. I had dinner at her house last Sunday. She made egusi soup and told me in the kitchen while we were doing dishes that she knew. She'd known since the first week the groceries showed up. Mothers know, she said. She'd just been waiting for me to be ready. I work on the executive floor now. My nameplate says Tegan Halverton, no apologies. I'm being trained formally to take over from my father in the next decade. He still hasn't retired. He says he wants 10 more years. I think he wants 20. I think he wants 20. I think he wants to die in that office, honestly, and I have made peace with that. The dying ficus, against all odds, recovered. It's on my new desk, by the window that looks out over Elliott Bay, and it has put out 3 new leaves since September. I wear my mother's wedding ring on a chain around my neck now. I didn't before. I do now. I think about her every morning. I think about what she said about the people who load the trucks. There is one more thing. 3 weeks ago, my father came into my office on the executive floor and closed the door behind him, which he never does. He sat down across from me. He had an envelope in his hand. He looked, for a moment, much older than I had ever seen him look. He said, "Tegan, I have to tell you something. About the investigation." Okay, when Walt was tracing Roland's connections, looking for who fed him our internal information, he found something else. Something I didn't expect. I've been sitting on it for 2 weeks because I didn't know how to bring it to you. I should have brought it to you the day I found out. He slid the envelope across the desk. Your mother had a son before she met me. She gave him up for adoption when she was 19. She never told me. She never told anyone. Walt found him while he was running background checks on Roland's contacts because his voice cracked, just slightly. Because he came up as a flagged match in our own employee database. He works at our Long Beach distribution center. He's 41. He's been with us for 6 years. He has no idea. I opened the envelope. There was a photograph inside. A man in a warehouse jacket, leaning against a forklift, smiling at someone off camera. He had my mother's eyes. I'm flying to Long Beach next week. I don't know how I'm going to do this. I don't know what I'm going to say. I have a brother. I had a brother my whole life and I never knew. But I keep thinking about something my father said the night he landed back from Rotterdam. When I asked him about Roland and where he came from, he said, "He's a man who's been told a story his whole life and decided to come collect on it." There's another version of that story, though. Sometimes the story is real. And sometimes the person at the end of it isn't trying to take anything from you. Sometimes they don't even know you exist. I'll tell you what happens when I land. I think about that walk across the marble lobby a lot. The cardboard box, the dying ficus, Hector apologizing under his breath. I think about it because everything that happened next, every single piece of it, came from a choice I made years before, when I told my father I didn't want my last name on a door I hadn't earned the right to walk through. That choice cost me 10 months of pretending. It cost me lying to a friend who deserved better. But it also bought me something I couldn't have gotten any other way. I knew that company. I knew which people were carrying it on their backs and which people were rotting it from the inside. And when Roland walked into my building with a forged story and a stolen name, I already had 13 names on a legal pad before sunrise. That wasn't luck. That was the harvest of a quiet decision I made at 26, sitting across from my father with a Wharton diploma in my lap. Here's what I keep coming back to. Roland didn't fall out of the sky. Philip Dornan didn't either. They were the consequence of years of small permissions. A vendor account nobody audited. A power vacuum nobody filled because my father trusted the wrong people too long. Bad things don't usually arrive as a single catastrophe. They accumulate. They wait. And then somebody walks through the door with a navy suit and a story and you realize the door was never locked in the first place. The flip side of that is also true though, and this is the part I want to remember. Cyrus's mother is alive because of a phone call I made at 2 a.m. to a woman who'd been loyal to my family for 22 years. Donna picked up on the second ring. She didn't ask why. That call worked because of 2 decades of trust I didn't build. My father did, by treating her like family year after year when nobody was watching. Good things accumulate too. Quietly. The same way. I learned something about helping people, also, sitting in that ER waiting room with my hands in my lap. The instinct, when you have money and someone you love is hurting, is to make it dramatic. Pull out the checkbook. Be the rescuer. But Cyrus didn't need a rescuer. He needed a friend whose dignity matched his. So I paid the bills through a fake grant program and I sent groceries from a fake neighborhood pantry and I shut my mouth. The help that lasts is the help that doesn't ask to be seen. If there's a single thing I want to say, it's this. Be the kind of person who does the right thing when the building is empty. Be honest with yourself about the small permissions you're granting. And when someone shows up claiming to be something they're not at your job, in your family, in your own head, trust the quiet work you've already done. Trust the years. Your real name will hold. Theirs won't. I'm flying to Long Beach next week. I have a brother. I'll let you know how it goes.